Hey there! So this is a demo of new module from Cella called Reach, it's body reach, which is an expressive attack decay envelope that allows you to modulate the dynamics of the envelope in any way you want, and also provides naturally sounding stepped accents. So let's jump into details. Alright, let's jump right into operation with the Reach module. You have a very normal attack decay envelope with logarithmic attack stage and exponential decay. You have a parameter shape that can interpolate between exponential and linear, and you have good options to change, for example, attack curve to exponential, and also to adjust the exponent function from quadratic to cubic to quartic. So here we have a gate sequence. This track corresponds to the envelope triggers and this one to accent triggers. We feed those gates and triggers to the oscilloscope. Blue corresponds to the accent and green corresponds to the gate. Red corresponds to the envelope. Yellow signal would correspond to the accent level, and I will explain that in a bit. So let's connect accents to the accent gate. You can see nothing happens besides the fact that the accent level starts going up and down. That means that the accent engine is working, but it's not applied to the envelope because the accent is built upon headroom above baseline level of the envelope. So level says the baseline level is the maximum where the envelope can go, basically the top point, and under normal conditions it goes to 10 volts, from 0 to 10. There's no room for the accents to be added to. If we decrease the level, we'll start seeing how accent operates. So I decrease the level down to 50%. Now the baseline peak corresponds to 5 volts and the accent peak corresponds to 10. And you can see how it also matches with the accent gate. Let's increase the speed of the clock. So now let's go into steps. So steps specifies how many stages accent will go through climbing to the peak with each consecutive gate, accent gate. So currently just one step, so it immediately goes to the peak. So let's increase that to 3. And you can see how it splits the headroom into 3 stages and goes through them until there's no more gate at the accent. So when the gate arrives to the envelope input, if it doesn't see the accent at the input, it just resets the accent stage down to minimum and proceeds without any accent. So you can see it goes from the lowest to the topmost point. We can invert that by clicking it on the descending accent input. So now it goes from the top down to bottom, and you can trigger that with the gate, of course. So the last thing for these controls is that the steps can also go to negative, which means that accent will start performing as inverted accent, basically subtracting from the baseline level. For that, I would suggest increasing level down to maximum, maybe lowering a bit the accent, and then inverting accent. So you can see when there is no accents, it actually at the maximum level, and when there is a accent gate, it resets down to bottom and start climbing up, and we can invert that backward. So you can make a nice ghost notes effect and so on. And the last but also very important thing, the accent input is actually a gate input. It is a CV input. So whatever you send to it sets the level, additional level of the accent. And you can send any CV signal to it. We can demonstrate that with the output from the random module. I would suggest to set these steps to 1 or -1, because if you have a big number of stages, it starts to interfere with the input signal. It's totally fine to set the accent to 1 because the level is modulated by the external signal, so to speak. So let's connect the accent to the output. And you can see that now the external input just modulates the accent in an arbitrary way. You can completely remove level, for example, and now you have envelope just of arbitrary level. So it's not only about accent, but it's just about dynamics of the envelope. But you can offset that dynamic down to very subtle levels. And now also important thing about the accent output, it isn't affected by the level set here. So you can completely remove that level here, but you still have this at the output. It is done so you can use the accent output even without having this accent effect and modulate some external module or some internal parameter with that dynamics. For example, let's connect the accent to the decay CV input. And you can see here it's kind of opening hi-hat a bit. So I find it pretty useful. So that's all I had to share here, and now I want to share a bit about interesting feature of Rich, which I haven't seen in other modules. So the way any module with accent works is that when at the moment of triggering it has nothing at the accent input, there is no accent dynamics added. And of course, if there's accent, something above 0, then accent is triggered. And you would expect that to work under any conditions. So let's run an example. So here we run the 16 nodes directly to trigger input and also to the input of Bernoulli gate, which decreases the probability of gate passing to 50%. And you see these dynamics again on a oscilloscope. So what happens here, based on the implementation of the VCV rack, each cable actually adds one sample of delay to the signal chain. So in fact, trigger coming to trigger input arrives one sample earlier because it just passes one cable than accent trigger because it passes through 2 cables. But as you can see, it doesn't affect, and you can still see the dynamics. So this is a unique feature of Rich. It compensates for this delay by having a window set number of samples before and after trigger where it can still register the accent. Specifically, currently it's set at 5 samples, and this is default. It can be also 10 samples before trigger and 10 samples after trigger, and you can switch it off. So let me demonstrate what happens when you don't have that compensation. As you can see, there's no dynamics. It is because accent arriving to the input one sample later. So when trigger looks, okay, I received the trigger, but I don't see any accent, so there will be no accent at the envelope. And that's how majority of the modules that have this feature work. I observed that and tested quite a few. So I think this is quite a unique feature, which you shouldn't notice, but you might appreciate if you know about it. So That's all I had to share, and now I will close it off with a small demo.